NutriCast.
So when the baby came, the spirit, the soul of this baby is absolutely the baby I met that day. And I had actually communicated with her again through another journey, actually with Paul on his 60th birthday. I was communicating directly with this soul, checking in on her and checking in on my wife. I don't really know for sure, but I do think that, let's say a baby doesn't come through the vagina and they come through the abdomen. I'm not so sure that they're fully embodied with any of those energetic bodies. I think the soul is far more complicated than like, you've been upgraded with the soul. I think it's a continuum. So babies that come through by C-section, maybe they keep one foot in the astral. They're not fully embodied with spirit yet. And that foot in the astral allows them to bring angelic healing properties and powers to our communities. Maybe there is a good reason to have some C-sections. I don't know, but this is really fucking cool to think about.
Welcome, beautiful beings, to season 2 of the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast with your host, Harrison Ma. This podcast sets the loving intention of creating the mystical space needed to pull back the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. Now let's walk you home to your cosmic spiritual heart space. Before we continue this beautiful chat today, wonderful souls, I need to jump in here to share something really exciting. If you've been following these episodes or you've been following me on social media, you know that I am in the process of releasing my first book, Your Cosmic Love Antenna, Define, Embody, and Emit Your Unique Frequency of Love. And at the time of this episode release, pre-orders are now open. If you have been pulled to this show, if you're looking to understand the what, the how, and the why of love, if you're looking to apply some of the tools connected to your chakras, inner child, releasing religious trauma, ancestral healing, emotional release, and so much more, then this beautiful expression from my heart to yours is for you. If you are looking to channel more of your unique gifts and the divine frequency that you are, these pages will open all of this up. And if you're interested, all you need to do is go to cosmicloveantenna.com. That's cosmicloveantenna.com. And you can pre-order this book right now. If you pre-order, click on that link, put in your email, you're going to get access to some special gifts that I'm only offering to those who get in before I release it fully. These gifts are going to be some more channeled meditations, activations, and some other surprises from my heart to yours. So head over to cosmicloveantenna.com, pre-order this beautiful expression, and I can't wait to hear how it shifts your life. If you're listening to this after pre-order sales, that same link can be also used to go to the direct purchase link. Sending love, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this episode today. Good morning, evening, afternoon, magical beings. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to another loving conversation into the layers restricting health, alignment, and love. It's been a busy week. Another episode here today from my heart to yours with a powerful, loving man and a topic that I know is going to awaken some deeper understandings in you. But as always, before we get started, before I get to introduce this magical being, a reminder for all the people joining live today on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. As always, if you have comments, questions as we flow throughout this chat, please leave them in the comment section. I'd love to incorporate your love into this discussion. If you're listening on the podcast, please share this out far and wide with any lover, a friend, or family member that you think can gain value from this chat. Make sure you stick around to the end, because I know that the lovely Nathan's going to share so many gems and insights that you won't want to miss. Speaking of lovely Nathan, I want to introduce my powerful guest today. Nathan Riley, MD, is a board certified OB-GYN. His mission, and I want to read this to you because I think this highlights why this man is on this show here today. Nathan's mission is to uphold midwifery as the art that it is, and to honor birth as the sacred process, and the transition to parenthood as a spiritual transformation. Dr. Riley empowers women to have babies on their own terms, Using nature as our guide, he helps fathers embrace the opportunity to connect with birth and their partners through pregnancy and birth, encouraging them to go deeper versus distancing themselves from the stigmatized but magical rite of passage. With all of this, Nathan and I, we're going to go into divine birth today. And we're going to talk about the divine masculine, the role of the father, divine presence, meeting God around birth, and everything in between. Nathan, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for that. A really beautiful introduction. Thank you. It really captures me. I appreciate it.
Well, Nathan, it does capture you, but I'm sure you've experienced this. Sometimes I find it very hard, especially within the work that I do, and your work is very similar in terms of what it's helping people awaken to. I find it very hard to put labels on things sometimes. I find it very hard to put myself in a box. Do you struggle with that in your world?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess to boil it down to just all the medical training and all of that other stuff, you're kind of expected to just do what you're told at the end of the rainbow. And that's not very fun. If I have all the answers, then life just gets to be very dull and drab. So being put into a box, people think, oh, a doctor, they expect you to do certain things, but I don't really want to be told what to do, especially if it's not relevant to this person that I've taken an oath to care for. So putting me in a box as a doctor is a little bit hard because I haven't met anybody like me. People reach out all the time and they're like, can you help me find a doctor like you to attend my birth in Wyoming? And I'm like, even if I knew somebody in Wyoming, I don't know if they would really do things the way I do it. So I can, maybe reach out to see if there's an OB-GYN that has a C-section rate, but it's way, way beyond just these numbers that people throw around. It's really how we show up in the world. So it's hard for me to put labels on myself, but a doctor's one of them. Father's another, husband, brother, son, that requires me to wear many hats. And at the end of the day, I still wake up and put my pants on and go to work.
Yeah.
Taking care of people. So,
and Nathan, just to give you some love, that state of, you said that nobody is like me and I'm so unique. I actually think that's all of us, right? But
yeah.
Unfortunately, and maybe this is another discussion for another day, but unfortunately, most of us aren't finding that. Most of us aren't remembering our uniqueness. And I'll take it a step further. Not only are we not remembering our uniqueness, we're not valuing it, right? We're not seeing it as the answer, right? Your uniqueness, people come to see you for all of your beautiful tools and skills, and we'll talk about them today. But the real reason they come and see you is because you're really embodying what you are uniquely, and people are pulled to that. Would you agree?
I would say so. And I think this is a really good time to encourage anybody listening that at the end of the day, you're the one who has to go to sleep and wrestle with your decisions and the outcomes of those decisions. You have all of the power within you to make decisions that are right for you, for your family, maybe your growing baby, whoever. There's nobody out there that knows you and your experience better than you. So own it. That uniqueness is really the richness. That's the variety of life right there. For us to try to put everybody into a neat box and generalize this data set to their experience, that's why we're coming up empty-handed as we try to improve maternity care or healthcare or whatever. But really, even in your everyday life, I still rake my leaves. I still cut my grass. I still plant seeds in the spring and hope to harvest some vegetables in the fall. I'm still going about my day doing the things that is very Nathan Riley in its essence. For somebody to tell me that those are not valuable, that is confronting to my whole experience, because it's very valuable for me to be me. And it's very valuable for anybody out there to realize that uniqueness that you bring into my circle when we get to meet one another, that uniqueness, that is actually what I'm craving. And I think nowadays we're so desperate for authenticity, and it's hard to be authentic in a world that wants you to be something you're not. So when you show up in that way and you send out this vibrational energy of Nathan Riley-ness or Harrison Meagerness, that's actually so valuable to the world. Like, we need diversity. We need new ideas. We need new experiences. That is actually why my life is so rich. I'm very wealthy because I have so many people in my life that are just so damn weird.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that weird. That's richness there.
It's, I didn't plan to go here, Nathan. This is just bubbling up, but I'm loving that we're speaking about this. And for people tuning in, you don't know this, Nathan, but I just this last week, 2 weeks, I've just released my first book, and part of my book is talking about this unique frequency of love that we are, right? I call it your love frequency, and it's this unique soul blueprint that we all have, that we've come here to embody and share with the world. Not just activate within ourselves, but as you're beautifully saying, show up in the spaces and places that mean the most to us and show that frequency, because it does something very significant. And I'll wrap this up because I do want to ask you some questions about birth and pregnancy. But when we show up in that unique frequency, it inspires and reminds other people that they can do the same. So when Nathan Riley is in his Nathan Riley-ness, it shows Harrison that, oh, I can do that too. I have permission. I don't have to succumb to all of the systems outside of me that are telling me to be something different.
Yeah, I just had I don't know if you know the name Mark Groves. He has a big podcast called Create the Love. He's a good friend of mine. And his whole platform is building better relationships with one another, with yourself, with your kids. He just had a baby with his partner. And what I love about people like you and people like Mark and our mutual friend, Jason Picard, who was just on your show, is that there's every reason in the world to feel insecure about who you are. We've been conditioned to believe that we're not good enough for our entire lives. It's through tests. It's through, government agencies. It's through mom and dad. It's through our priest or pastor, whatever. There's always something broken in Nathan Riley, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for me to show up with all those insecurities, just guns blazing, like, here I am, like, love me or hate me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to say that like, I'm going to use like racist language or whatever and say, hey, you just love me for who I am. I'm not saying that, but the authentic version of me is desperately craving the authentic version of you. And when you show up like that for me or any of these people I mentioned, it gives me permission to really be myself. And if I can't be myself, we can't have a relationship. It's just not going to work. Try that in a marriage. It goes south real fast.
Well, Nathan, I'm sure you've seen this too, at the nth degree, but you can have that in relationships, but this is what causes addiction. This is what causes cheating. This is what causes abuse, right? These are the pain teachers that we ignore and we suppress, right? But Nathan, thank you for going on that little beautiful spiritual rant with me. And I think
shit, man.
Yeah, me too. I do want to talk about your expertise here, because I think this can really give a lot of people value. And for people that are tuning in either live or on the show, haven't had the chance to experience Nathan before, he is a powerful OB-GYN. He's a midwife. And I'd really encourage you after this chat to go listen to what's your podcast called again? Nathan, what's the name of it?
Called the Holistic OB-GYN.
Yes, there you go. So definitely tune into that. And if you go to Nathan's website, he also has many of the shows he's spoken to. And the reason I share this is because Nathan is a wealth of knowledge. And I want to tap into that knowledge, Nathan, first here by asking you, for people watching live, they can see in your video, you have a very interesting fluorescent light behind you of a fallopian tube with the tube with its finger up. And I think I'd love to hear what this image symbolizes to you, and we'll go from there.
So before I tell you about the uterus that's behind me, let me also just preface everything we're going to be talking about with a little permission to lean into this conversation, not through the lens of a medical doctor, but through just a human. Birth has long been treated, for the past several hundred years especially. We've doubled and tripled down on this notion that birth is a medical procedure. and that pregnancy is a disease. If that were true, then we're doing a great job. You know, moms and babies are rarely dying in childbirth in the rich countries of the world. In the United States, it's somewhere like 5 to 6 kids in 1,000 die through childbirth. For moms, it's like 17 in 10,000. It's quite an unlikely scenario that you or your baby will die when you have a baby. And that's good. Our medical stuff has seemed to improve these numbers. Now, we're certainly doing way worse than a lot of other countries. So I'll give that caveat. But the point in me saying this is that everything that I'm going to be saying about pregnancy and childbirth is really not medical stuff. So if you have no interest in clinical things, or if you have no desire to have a baby in the near future or whatever, that's actually not relevant, because childbirth generally goes pretty well. Like there's just not a lot that generally has to happen. So then why are we talking about this? Well, the thing behind me is a uterus, and the left fallopian tube is flipping the bird. And a big part of the reason I had this personally designed was that there's a lot of people telling you what you should or shouldn't do in life in general. The tax guys, all the people I mentioned, mom and dad, the priests, the religious leaders, whatever. Everybody has been telling you what to do for your entire life. And you have felt compelled and conditioned to ask permission, even at an early age, to go to the bathroom. The very basic human things. And in your medical training, you're not laughing, you're not smiling, you're not doing anything unless your supervising doctor says it's okay to go do that. Heaven forbid you have to take a dump in the middle of a long surgery. Like, suck it up, buttercup. If you're cut out for this, you'll hold it, or you'll just poop your pants or whatever. There was a surgeon who actually pooped his pants when I was in residency, and it was like, there's another trainee. It was like, what are you doing?
That's the next sign that you have made in the background.
Yeah, right. As a surgeon pooping their pants. Yeah. So when you get pregnant, suddenly now you're thrust into this position where you ultimately have to make the decisions that are best for you and your baby. And if you're a man caring for a woman who's pregnant, it's on you as well. You guys have to work together to ultimately decide and take responsibility for every decision and the outcomes of every decision. This may be the first time that you've ever been, thrust into this position. So the uterus flipping everything off is really a reflection of this concept of radical responsibility, where there's certain things that are in our control. We can have an easy breezy pregnancy and childbirth. If you're not willing to accept those decisions in pregnancy and childbirth, what are you going to do when you're a parent? Like, nobody out there is going to hold your hand and stroke your ego because you did your best. You got to keep this kid alive, and you're ultimately responsible for how they show up in the world. And hopefully they end up like somebody like you. And of course, there's no guidebook, but you have to be willing to do your own internal work intuitively and to get the available information in order to make these decisions. And then you have to own those decisions. Yeah. So the uterus says, you don't have the say over me. I ultimately am going to own my decisions and the outcomes of those decisions.
I love it, Nathan. And you shared that lovely story with me and what it represents when we had our pre-chat. And the reason I wanted you to share it is because I think it highlights beautifully the Nathan Riley-ness that you are in this world that we spoke about at the start of the show, right? It shows in the current work that you're doing and your frequency that you're sharing through it. From what we just heard, it's a big purpose, right? It's a big purpose to help people see this. And I want to add something in here, Nathan, that maybe you've felt into, and it's just because it's a big theme on here on this show. That sort of powerlessness and taking the power back and taking in all the beautiful information, all the professionals, all of their views, but realizing at the end of the day that, you have the say, you have the power, you have the intuition, you have the knowing. The programming of this, the limiting belief that my power is outside of me and I need to go to the person externally first before I trust my intuition. It's not a one lifetime thing, Nathan, in my experience. It's a ancestral, and if you want to go there, and we will, because this is what I do on this show, it is a multi-lifetime pressure. And this is what I want to get your views on, just to see how you feel about this and what your perspective is. I actually feel that that's one of the reasons it is so difficult for us to break free. I'll give an example. Let's say that I grew up in a family that has a very strong religious history, has a very strong Catholic history, or a very strong, name the religion. And based off that, I would have had multi-generations of people believing this power is outside of me. So I guess this question for you, Nathan, is, have you seen this pressure? Have you seen this sort of multi-generational force that's stopping people from breaking free?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is yes. I think that we're seeing this resurgence in intuition as authoritative knowledge. I think we're starting to see this reemerging where people are like, I think one of the silver linings of Schmovid thing, probably can't say that.
You're all good. You're all good.
One of the silver linings, a piece of the silver lining was that people realized, oh, people are telling me things that are not in direct, it's in conflict with my direct experience. It would be, as simple, everybody's going to drop dead of this thing. Well, people aren't dropping dead around me. So what else do you got? Like, what are we doing here? It would be as silly as somebody bringing you a yellow crayon and saying, this is green.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, no, it's not. It's yellow. They're like, oh, no. The data says it's green. There's something, there's some problem with this deep conditioning, and it goes very, very deep. Our parents, our grandparents, their grandparents, we've all been playing by the rules and expecting that if you play by the rules, everything goes well. But I think people are starting to tune into what their actual lived experience is. And intuitively, they're feeling that somebody's trying to pull some wool over my eyes. I think that what I have seen happen, I can't really speak to the transgenerational sort of awakening, because I don't think that I think it's such a personal experience. It's one of those ineffable things to really describe. But I can say that people have come to work with me, and I've seen something click where suddenly they're feeling like, oh, my direct experience with my life, my story is being acknowledged by somebody who I've been conditioned to trust as an authority. And they're actually giving me the power. They're giving me permission to feel into that. And you can see something click. And the next time you see them, they're standing a little bit taller. They seem like they feel more confident. They feel safer in the world. And the word safety, we won't even get into that. But something about it is like, they just realize, oh, a lot of this is bullshit. And I'm okay. I'm like, okay, just doing this thing that is Nathan Riley. And there is immense power in just claiming that for yourself. So when you see that little light bulb go off, it's like, aha, you're ready to be a parent. Mm-hmm. And even people who become parents, sometimes that light bulb doesn't ever go off. Maybe not until much later in life, where they feel screwed by some part of the system or whatever you want to call it. So I have seen that light bulb go off, and I'm really actively thinking deeply and feeling into, why is it that it happens for some and not for others? Is this a transgenerational issue? Is there something here that really needs to be unpacked through maybe a very, a deep medicine journey or something like that, where your cerebral cortex, you're not thinking your way through this. You're actually experiencing it right now. And whatever happens in that journey for you, that medicine ceremony, whether it's psychedelics, maybe it's an MDMA therapy session, whatever happened there for you was very real. And it was only something that you can experience because it was you were there, and you can talk about it. And you may not have great language until 20 years later after you fully integrated. But getting, peeling back the layers of this onion, it's like this scar tissue to reveal the you. I think it takes a lot of time. And, these rites of passage, I think, are a perfect opportunity to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be forced to reconcile with it when you're on your deathbed. And whatever happens during that period of actively dying, those hard negotiations are going to come back, and you're going to have to reconcile it then. So I know it's not an answer to your question, but I think it's an important one.
I think it is an answer, Nathan, and it brings up something else here. And I'll speak to it, and then I want to jump to another question because I want to, something else where I'm being pulled towards. But I'll just say this, for the person that doesn't, because I've titled this episode, Nathan, birth, spiritual transformation, and meeting divinity. And I think it's very important for everyone to hear that spiritual transformation that may or may not occur, there is no judgment, right? I think this is another belief that we need to break free from, that there is this force a force outside of us that is on a cloud ticking a box that we've done the thing or we haven't done the thing, right? I'll use your example of getting to the deathbed and having to reconcile with some of the choice that we've made. Even at that moment, this is why I truly believe in karma, right? Karma is not good or bad. It is just balanced or unbalanced energy. And based off your lifetime of choices, let's say that you have made a lot of unbalanced choices. That's what multiple lives are for, right? I'll come back and I'll go again. But there's no judgment on that. There's no there's no thing outside of you that's saying, oh, you're back again, you're bad. No, you get equal opportunity to do the experience again. And that's where your free will comes in, right?
Right.
Do you agree with that, Nathan? Do you resonate with that?
I do. I mean, it sounds like it's straight from Zeri Zukov's, Seed of the Soul, or many of these other books that I think were probably part of like New Age, on the shelf in Barnes and Noble. But now I think people are really starting to feel into that space.
Yes. Yeah. Embody it. Embody
it. Exactly. I think a lot of people, they hear that stuff and they're like, they think it sounds nihilistic, like this doesn't matter, but it's the exact opposite of nihilism. And that's not to say that every single thing that you do, you're going to be punished for or rewarded for later. I'm not talking about that.
No.
And I'm saying you got to give yourself a break, and you have to be willing to ride this wave that is life. And you have the opportunity to decide what feels best. That intuition is coming from these karmic cycles that we find ourselves in. There's some reason you're being compelled to go left and not right in the woods.
Yes.
That is important. But we've outsourced our power to other people to tell us which way to turn. And that's where I don't think we close any of these karmic loops. If anything, it gets more tangled, if that's.
Yeah. Nathan, I'll share a quote with you from Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle says, there's no such thing as human beings, just karmic formations, right? And what he's alluding to there is what you're saying, is that everyone's walking around as these tangled formations of karmic energy based off lifetimes of choices that we've made. So anyway, I want to shift here, Nathan, to it's nice to chat with you because I can feel your big spiritual heart, and it's so easy to go into the spiritual heights, and I want to be there, but I want to balance it with some grounded birth conversation. And I guess what I want to ask you here, and we talked about this in our pre-conversation, I'm really interested as a man in the role of the father in birth. And a lot of your work centers around this, being a lovely man yourself. And I guess where I want to start is, what are your views on how the father is impacted spiritually during the birth process? So let me get even more specific. Me holding space for a partner that is going through the process. How is the man impacted spiritually during that whole process?
Well, I think that we oftentimes put the burden on women through this childbirth process. And, the man is like on his phone, kind of just chilling out, waiting for this baby to come. And he's thinking about, how much time am we going to have to take off from work? And, maybe I'll go take a nap while you're in labor. It's like, it's all of that. And that's okay for some, like, fine, you do you. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. But I do think men have this incredible opportunity to transform through this childbirth experience. And one way or another, you're going to be, your archetype is going to be transforming. You're not going to be the explorer anymore. You're going to be more of a nurturer now. You have this little baby you're going to be raising. But even more importantly, your partner is going through this transformation. Your relationship is going to change. And, even from the radical responsibility piece, there's a lot of young men that are walking around acting like they own the world, but they don't have a baby. When you have a baby now, a part of your identity has to go to this child. And if you're unwilling to give up a part of your identity to this child, you're going to be projecting a sort of resentment onto this child whenever this little baby's looking to you to love them. It's all that a baby needs is love. It's a simple thing, but it's very hard to do nowadays because we've become so self-absorbed. And while it's okay to be self-absorbed at times in our life, this is an incredible opportunity to really reset how it is that you show up in the world. Love is not a net zero game. You don't have to give love away and lose love from another relationship. This is an opportunity to grow your sphere of influence, how much you can love in the world. And if you have 10 kids or one kid, that love just continues to amplify. But that's very scary for us men, because at 26 or so, I was working on my abs and trying to get laid and experimenting with certain things and, trying to figure out who I was. Had I not figured out who I was, then it would be very, very confronting to be told, hey, you're rapidly going to have a transformation here, through this pregnancy and childbirth process. The opportunity for a man is to really learn the role of the divine masculine. The divine masculine, you could think about it. We go to Burning Man every year. If you look at an aerial shot of Burning Man, it's this big city that's built in the Nevada desert, and the salt flats are surrounded by mountains. And if you look during most times of the day during August in Black Rock Desert, you're going to see these swirls, these like 500 yards across maelstroms of dust. They're just swirling and swirling and swirling. You couldn't have that without this boundary of mountains. It creates this aerodynamic sort of situation in which these storms can just come up, they come and go over and over and over again, multiple times per hour sometimes. The divine masculine is the mountain.
The structure.
Divine feminine is the structure, right? The divine feminine is this maelstrom. The feminine is going to storm. It's going to shred through everything in its path. And you as the man are going to have to weather the storm. You may get a little eroded from the winds, but you can't control where that wind is going. And you've just focused the last, let's say, 26 years of your life on just looking at me. You can change yourself, but you can't change the feminine. So the role of the divine masculine is to provide a container in order to weather the storms that come as a condition of the divine feminine. There is no better way to practice masculinity than sitting and waiting, knowing that you cannot control this process. It doesn't matter how big you are, how you speak to the staff in the hospital. It doesn't matter how well read you are. This is completely out of your control. And it's your job as a man in childbirth to hold space. That's what the mountain does for the maelstrom. Hold space and let the divine feminine roar in all of its glory. That exercise alone, Harrison, that is the rite of passage. That is the rite of passage into manhood.
I love it. It's so beautiful, Nathan. You say that so eloquently, and I can feel your big heart behind all those words. So a few things here bubble up in me, and I want to speak more about that divine masculine, but just to hit on the man, the physical male, learning to open his heart. And I speak a lot about the chakra system here in the show, Nathan, and you could see it in my show logo. They're a big part of my work and how I support people. We're both in the Czech system, right? It's a big part of the Czech lifestyle, all the things. And how I was sort of receiving what you're saying about the masculine development, going from the solar plexus, ego identity, right? Starting to change our values from outside focused gain to inside focused sort of compassion, support, love. And the flow of energy through the chakra system goes upwards. So once I've rearranged those identities of my ego within the solar plexus, that allows me to now go deeper into the layers of my heart, right? And to receive the love that my partner is opening up to in the birth process and all the things, right? So I think just that image alone really supports. I want to go back though to the divine masculine. And this is my question for you. I loved your image of the desert and the physical male standing in there, divine masculine, for the physical female to be in her flow, to be in her feminine release and all the things. But my question for you, Nathan, do you see in your work when the man, the physical man, embodies his divine masculine, it gives permission within the birth process, because we're never just one polarity, right? We need both. We need the divine masculine, divine feminine. Do you see the physical male standing in their masculine by holding the container? That supports the feminine to come back into their masculine. So within the birth process, to maybe, take some action that's needed to, not just be in the flow all the time, but, get some stuff done. Do you see that mirror effect going on?
Yeah, I have a really great short story that will
highlight that,
illustrate this maybe. Yeah. So you're right. We all have masculine and feminine energy. We're talking energetics here. We're not talking about penises and vulvas. We're talking about just your energetic beingness in any one moment. It's going to be on this spectrum. And as a classic burner thing, I'm going to bring another Burning Man story in, because some of the exercises that you find yourself stumbling into at Burning Man are some of the most transformative. Somebody hosted what they called an emotathon at a tent. They were going to allow 30 women and 30 men, however you identify, 30 women, 30 men. It just so happened they were biological females and biological males for this purpose. And that was important because it was actually a Me Too sort of rendition, where they were going to ultimately permit the women to, one at a time, multiple times if they wanted, but one at a time, they would step into a circle and they would emote what they weren't able to express to somebody who hurt them. It could be physical rape. It could be somebody died too early. Their dad didn't care for them. He was a drunk, whatever. But it was energy directed towards typically a man in their life. Now, the magic was that they took all of the men outside, all 30, and they paired us up with random people, never met them in our lives. And we practiced standing about a yard or two apart, maybe a meter or two apart. And one at a time, we would express, yell in their face. We'd get up in their face and scream at them, with all of our might. And the guy I was paired up with was 6'5". He was this massive rugby looking player. And he got in my face. I could feel his hot breath. He was so close. There was a little spit coming out. He was really letting it out. He was channeling something in there. And we were instructed to stand with our shoulders down, our shoulders back, our chin down, to look them in the eye while this is happening, and turn our palms outwards and just receive. No response, no pushing back. Don't get out of my face. None of that stuff that happens at the bars. You're just going to let this hulking man just scream at your face. And then you switch roles. When he did it to me, it was certainly intimidating, because you don't usually do that in your everyday life. When I did it to him, he started crying.
Yeah.
Because he was actually allowing himself to receive what was very raw, anger, sadness, whatever it was that was coming out. I just projected it right into him. And his heart he made it available to receive. So there was a couple other exercises, but we actually went back into the tent. It was beautiful. Just that part. This was the warm up. And then inside the tent, we formed a sort of crescent around one side of the tent. And all the women were humming and had one hand on a shoulder nearby, and they were swaying and they were humming. My wife was in that group, and they were all sitting on the ground. We were standing. And for 3 hours, the women would step forward and pick somebody from the crowd who was relatable to this person that they had all this pent up resentment towards, I should say, that they had never been able to express. And one by one, they would call one of us out. Sometimes they would say, is it, do I have permission to slap, to kick, to punch, whatever? And you were just going to accept it. Now, we're not talking about like a man getting beat up and bloodied up by a woman and everybody's just standing by. If anything, it was little shoves, maybe a slap in the face, but a lot of screaming and a lot of rage that these women had kept bottled up for years. And here was a man who was standing there and just letting them emote. No response. No, but what about this? No problem solving, just receiving it.
Yeah.
That is a very, very, very powerful experience that will rip you right open.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a dry eye in the room, especially amongst the men after this 3 hours. I was just bawling. I was sobbing the whole time. And I wasn't even oftentimes the one being called out. It was just on behalf of everybody in the room, just feeling all of this. I think that's the best I can do to respond to that question. Again, it's not a direct answer, but
it doesn't need to be, Nathan. It highlights divinely what I was getting at. And I mean, it shows lots of things, but I think the thing I want to really underline here is within this spiritual lens that we're talking through today, we're all divine mirrors of each other. And it is in the act of relation, again, whether that relation is two friends, two lovers, two people having a baby, a family member, it is in the act of relation we can see the things that are very evident, and we can also see the things that are unconscious. And it's in this dance between the divine masculine and divine feminine within each being in relation to another person that we get opportunities to step in or to just feel and be. I'll share something here with you, Nathan, and this is for everyone. I often see the heart of God that is us, inside of us, our source, heart of oneness, whatever you want to call it. I see it as it's a heart, but it's the twin flame heart, right? It is the masculine and the feminine, right? And for a long time, I had the illusion that your twin flame is something outside of you. Your twin, like everything we've been talking about today, your twin flame is a person that will inevitably come into your world. And while that still may happen, the deepest form of the twin flame is the heart that you already have. So when we're in those dynamics that you just highlighted to the story, that twin flame is active, right? It's fluctuating to what it needs at that moment. And some of us need the outburst and the pure emotive expression. And some of us just need a moment to actually feel what it feels like to receive, to just, I would call it, be in that voidal feminine heart.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that if people are listening, if they're thinking about the mountain with the maelstrom, it may not fit this exactly, but it is the same thing.
It is.
The yin, and since you're a Czech practitioner, Paul, who's a friend of mine, I was his OB-GYN. I don't know if you knew that, but that's how I got to
yeah.
Paul talks quite a bit about yin and yang. It was the first mentor I had that really helped me appreciate this. But if we were to look at feminine and masculine, we could say yin and yang. Well, these two twin flames, they are relying on one another, and one becomes the other. But that exercise in the tent was really me exercising the divine feminine in simply receiving. It's the moon versus the sun, which is amplifying, and it's broadcasting. We have receiving, this receiver here that is taking all of that in and passing it back to the yang to broadcast out again, and then receiving it, passing it back to the yang, as the yin yang symbol shows. We as men are very, very infrequently incentivized to practice the receiving part of this. Yes. Probably what is mostly wrong with our society right now.
Yeah.
We only incentivize.
I could not agree with that more, Nathan. And I think a limiting belief around it, and I'll add this and I want to jump to another question here, because we could speak about this topic all day. But I think a reason for that, Nathan, and I want all the men to hear this, women too, but specifically the physical male, because it is prominent, is we don't see it as valuable. We don't, right. In that receivership that you just outlined, as the man, there is this limiting illusion that is not value, that I'm not, if I'm not, as you in your words, if I'm not broadcasting, if I'm not getting out there and doing the thing, I'm not valuable. I'm not worthy, and I'm not enough. And I think that is the root shadow of why, again, just speaking from a male body, why the male body has trouble with the feminine, because that's another pervasive, much like the power is outside of us. I'm not worthy in my stillness is another illusion, right? That continues.
It's Nathan, all an illusion. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I want to ask you now I want to get you to speak about part of your mission statement that you share with me is really diving into something you call the sacred conversion point. And I want to maybe add some context to this, and I want to hear you elaborate on it more. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you is because I'm really fascinated with not just by death and how death is a transformation and a spiritual awakening in many ways, but how birth is a spiritual awakening, as we've talked about today, not just for the soul that's coming in through the parents, but for the parents themselves, right? So I'm wondering if you can speak to this. What do you mean, Nathan, when you say sacred conversion point in the context of birth?
I mean, quite literally, that when a woman gives birth to a baby, that she is creating the universe de novo. This is a constant creative process, and the force driving that process is love. There's a great illustration by Alex Gray, the incredible psychedelic artist who actually started as a medical anatomist. So if you type in, if you're listening out there and you're not familiar, Alex Gray, Grey, type in birth, Alex Gray, and you'll see this incredible image where there's all these waveforms entering in through the top of a woman's head, through her body, all the way down through the chakra systems, and exiting through the crown of her baby's head that is emerging from her vagina.
Beautiful.
So that convergence point is everything in the ether, every last bit of whatever. I'm not going to call it matter, but everything enters in and out through this, could call it a cosmic antenna, actually, and emerges with this. A woman is giving birth to the universe every time she has a baby. And I'm not saying it's in her. I'm saying the feminine is giving birth to every last thing that we could ever possibly even fathom. Every idea, every dimension, every plane within every dimension, within every dimension. Mm-hmm. There is, well, let me also describe this. So there's a perinatal matrices theory by a guy named Stan Groff. I don't know if we talked about this before, but this amniotic universe that this baby is living within has this warm fluid around it, and it's growing inside mom. And at some point, that little room that the baby is living in becomes compressed. There's like not as much room now. Suddenly, you feel very trapped as a baby. And then a little light opens up at the end, and you go towards that light, and then you emerge into the earth school. That's this struggle with death and rebirth. This is happening over and over and over again. Every moment of every day, this is happening over and over. Stan Groff suggests, or he conjectures, because we're not going to say it's a theory, can't really test this, but there's something intuitively that makes sense about it, that you're becoming embodied with these subtle energetics of the human being. Your etheric, through the lens of Steiner, it'd be called the you got your physical meat suit, but then you have your etheric body. That's the life force energy. And then you have your astral, that's spirit. That's the animating factor. That gives you some will. But then you have the I, your consciousness. That's the last part to be embodied. And I don't think that you actually get embodied with your consciousness during birth. I actually think that's something that comes in later.
That's so interesting. So I have to jump in here, Nathan, because please. As I was listening to you speak, that was my next question I was going to ask you. It just popped in as you were speaking. So let's talk about it now, because I want to ask. So everything that you just said around the convergence point and then the image that you were giving around the baby, the space, and then releasing into the world. Depending on who you speak to, I've spoken to many people on the show that have different opinions on this. The actual soul itself, some people think it comes in within that time that's in the womb. And it goes as far as to say a couple of years after the actual physical birth. So I guess, what's your opinion on this, Nathan? Where do you think the soul, the unique expression of God that we are, where does it begin? And this physical universe that you were just describing, where does it start? Where do they meet?
Well, I told everybody we're not talking about clinical obstetrics here. Yeah. This is really where it's at for me. It's a great question. I don't have an answer, but I will say, I'll share another brief story. When my wife and I were pregnant with our second baby, the second was born at home. It's the most beautiful birth I'd ever been a part of. And our daughter's name is Everly Rosa. And she's about a year and some change, maybe a year and a half now, pushing that. When we were pregnant with her, my wife felt called to use psychedelics, mushrooms. I grow my own, so we knew where they were coming from, and she felt called to use them. So we got there's this, Red River Gorge is within this beautiful national park, about an hour and a half or 2 hours away from us here in Kentucky. We got a tree house there, which the way it was set up is it's connected to other tree houses. And then there's this big cargo net thing with bistro lights. And there's a little platform over here in this tree that's the shower station. Really lovely place to spend some time. It was raining that weekend. And one of the nights we took a relatively small dose of mushrooms. But if you're aware, if you're listening, it's not really a dose dependent relationship to your experience with these powerful medicines. And so while we were on this journey, I had my hand on my wife's belly and stuff was starting to like really kick in. And I had this figure come to me, and it was a typical figure. These images always come to me when I'm in these ceremonies, but this was different. And I started talking and interacting with it. And this is, of course, I'm seeing this with my third eye. This is not a visual hallucination, but it occurred to me that this is the soul of our daughter.
Yes.
And I asked her, I said, "Are you my daughter?" And she said, "Yeah, hi, Dad." I said, "How are you doing?" Like, we just took mushrooms in pregnancy. That's a big no-no, right? She was like, "Oh, I'm okay, but Mom's having a hard time." And I looked up at my wife, and she was just really having a hard time with this. And who knows what that was? That's her story. But I just kept my hands on my wife, and this little figure, I was interacting with her. "How do you like your name?" "Oh, it's cool, I guess." I mean, this is actually what I was experiencing. And eventually it kind of fluttered away. And, not too long after that, another song kind of hit. And, it took me back into this weird space where this figure came back and was dancing and twirling. And there were these three like shadowy kind of figures that were over top of her. Like she was in an arena, and these figures were like animating her. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was really beautiful. And there's not so much like, how do you know that was her? I don't, but I felt it. Like I do know that it was her, but I can't prove it to you. So when the baby came, the spirit, the soul of this baby is absolutely the baby I met that day. And I had actually communicated with her again through another journey, actually with Paul on his 60th birthday. I was communicating directly with this soul, checking in on her and checking in on my wife. And at that time, it kind of came to me as like a text message thread. It was a really hard journey, as it always is with Paul. But anyways, the reason I say all of that is I don't really know for sure But I do think that, let's say a baby doesn't come through the vagina and they come through the abdomen. I'm not so sure that they're fully embodied with any of those energetic bodies. I think the soul is far more complicated than like, you've been upgraded with the soul. I think it's a continuum. So babies that come through by C-section, maybe they keep one foot in the astral. They're not fully embodied with spirit yet. And that foot in the astral allows them to bring angelic healing properties and powers to our communities. Maybe there is a good reason to have some C-sections. I don't know, but this is really fucking cool to think about.
It is. Nathan, I just want to say I'm really enjoying your stories today. I'm really, I think this is the first time probably ever on this show where there's been an urge inside of me just to listen to you like I would be listening like a normal podcast. And I have to remind myself that I'm actually here. I'm hosting. So I just want to give you some love because I'm really enjoying the imagery. How I do this show, one of the ways that I do it is I close my eyes and I allow images to come through, and your images are coming through so clearly and mystically. So I just want to say that this understanding around meeting the soul before it comes in, I want to underline this for people, for everyone listening, because my audience is a lot of light workers, a lot of healers, a lot of spiritually awakening souls, many here in the live. Rose, I see you down there, my friend, and Raven for popping in. This is not new to them. And I see myself in the future, if I decide to have children, doing a very similar experience to what you went through, Nathan, maybe with medicines, maybe not, but having a very intentional ceremony to invite in the soul. Because I agree with you. We can't, not yet anyway, we can't scientifically validate these things, but we don't need to, because they're there and we can invite them in. I guess my question for you, Nathan, is in the world that you are in, because you have a very big foot in science and with all the work that you do, when you project into the future, that ceremony that you went through, do you see it becoming quote unquote mainstream? Do you see it becoming quote unquote normal? And when I say ceremony, I mean, the engagement with the soul that's coming, with the parents that have the baby, that are getting ready to give birth. Do you see it becoming as mainstream as, insert current practice here, right? Insert, I don't even want to say the normal ones, because most of them are, another show, another time. But do you get what I'm saying? Do you see it becoming mainstream and normal?
Yeah, I actually get quite a bit, because I'm so outspoken and such an advocate for some of these medicines when used in the appropriate, with an appropriate set and setting. Obviously we don't have clinical research. Nobody's signing up for a randomized controlled trial funded by the Institutes for Health on psychedelics use in pregnancy. Nobody's signing up for that, but we have enough evidence, anecdotally in my own life, not just in my personal life, but also with a lot of clients and friends who have used ayahuasca, psilocybin, etc., in their pregnancies. I think just like with any psychedelic journey, you have to be very, very thoughtful about, like, what is the intention here? Is this a ceremony, or is this a way of escaping something? If you're taking an escapist approach, and you just want to see if it's fun to connect with the soul of your baby, you may not necessarily have that experience. But I also had gone through the birth of our first, and I really struggled with fatherhood. And I don't think if I had actually closed that circle and really identified as a father, I'm not so sure that would have happened. Maybe that soul would have been afraid to come and approach me. But Evie and I, my daughter that was born shortly thereafter, she and I have a very, very special connection. And my wife says, like, you're her favorite. And who knows if that was the mushrooms or me connecting with her, but maybe there was some reason that she felt safe in coming to me with all of these unknowns when she arrives in the Earth School. I do want to circle back a little bit, though, and talk about that first one, for people out there who do, maybe even for you, if you do want to become a father someday, you have to really, really know yourself before you go into this journey, because your identity is going to crumble before your eyes now that you're a dad, if you're not very, very firm and intentional with how you show up in the world. So for me, I struggled with fatherhood in the first 6 months of our baby's life. Our first daughter, Penelope. Penelope Luce was born right before COVID happened. So we did a lot of nesting, a lot of connecting, but there was a lot of time in the house with a baby that's screaming. And as a man, you think, what does the baby need? Change the diaper, get them to sleep, burp them, give them breast milk. Well, I didn't have breasts. I didn't produce breast milk. The baby wasn't addicted to me because of my smell, not like she was to my wife. And I was struggling with like, what the hell is my role here? What am I supposed to be doing here? And my wife had realized that I was unable to hold space. Again, there's that receiving thing that I hadn't practiced, but just receiving this little person screaming. It seems like they're in pain. It seems like the world's coming to an end, but they're just emoting. And I had a hard time holding her through that and loving her through those periods. I would get frustrated. I'd get resentful. I'd get angry. And I just started distancing myself. So yeah, go ahead.
No, I just this brings up another topic here, Nathan, that I want to ask you about, and I'm so keep going.
Let me just tell you the punchline here, and I think then it'll be a little bit more clear what I'm getting to. So in order to do that, I had to take a step back and realize maybe I'm not confident that I can identify as a father.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not for me. I mean, I started having all this self-doubt. So my wife and daughter, Penelope, she was like 6 months at the time. They went on a trip back home to Pittsburgh. And I was at home because I had some work things to do. And I took a very, very large dose of mushrooms and I played some very beautiful music. And I ended up, I didn't pass out, but I went into a very, very dark space and I was going down a tunnel. This is again, with my third eye. I was going down a hallway with an endless hallway, and everything that you could ever know was written on the walls. It was like accessing the Akashic records. I had access to everything that ever was known, is known, or could be known. And at the end of that long hallway with all this stuff written all over it, wish I could remember all of that. Wouldn't that be fun? I arrived at the end of the hallway and there was a void of nothingness. I don't just mean like deep space, like we're at like remote viewing. I meant nothingness, whatever that looks like or feels like to you. For me, it was like utter nothingness was like blackness. Like it was just void of any light, anything, no feeling, no nothing. And I was shoved off of that. I was looking into this void and something shoved me from behind. And then I found myself in this space where I had everything I ever wanted, all of the knowledge in the world. I was the most gifted, educated, accomplished person. My ego was just like beaming with joy. And then a voice came to me in this ceremony that said, now that you have it all, who are you? And I didn't have an answer. So I opened my eyes at that time, like maybe the mushrooms were coming down or whatever. But the first thing I saw was a bassinet. And I just fell apart.
Yeah.
Child's bassinet. And for 4 hours, I just laid there with my dog and just cried and cried and cried. And it doesn't have to be a moral to every story, but the medicine for me was realizing that if I wanted to identify as a father and stand in my big boy pants for the first time in my life, I had to give a piece of my identity to this little baby. And that was the hardest fucking thing that I could ever have imagined, is giving a piece of me to somebody else. Are you kidding me? You know, like we talk about romance and love. I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I had never actually given a piece of myself unconditionally to some other person for them to have some father with them at all times. I am now inextricably linked with my little girls, but that was a very, very, very hard lesson to learn in that way.
Can I give an alternate interpretation of that experience?
Yeah. It's going to be with me forever, Harrison. It better be good. I'm just kidding.
Well, and I don't say alternate because I think what you experienced is what you experienced, and how it impacts you is what matters most, right? And I think it's beautiful. And I think that connection to the soul that is your child is important, and that giving and making that link. But this is what I wanted to hit on as you were expressing, and I'm happy that you ended with this child imagery, Going back to what you said about the male not knowing how to interact with the child as a father, a theme that we've spoken about in many ways throughout this chat today is the divine mirror. And when I think about that dynamic of a man with a physical child, not knowing how to interact with that physical child, the first place I go to is our relationship with our own inner child, right? Relationship with our own internal inner childlike being inside of us. And when I hear that story that you just shared, Nathan, I think in many ways, a big part of that is also a coming back to your own inner child, coming back to your own eternal inner child, if you want to call it an archetype, that deserves that same attention, that piece of you that you gave to your physical child. Your inner child needs that same attention. And when we embody that, it then ripples out into the physical world, right? So I want to hear your thoughts on this, but I'll just end by saying, I know a big part of your work and world is helping men to become more powerfully sensitive, right?
Yeah.
I
like that.
Powerfully sensitive. Yeah. And for me, how I've become more powerfully sensitive is the awakening of that inner child relationship, right? Is that awakening of, and I wouldn't say healing the inner child, but letting the inner child know that it's seen, supported, and loved, much like you were describing with giving that piece to your daughter and your physical children. Does that resonate, Nathan?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm far more a fan of Carl Jung than Freud, but they both talk a lot about this dynamic with how we were raised by our parents and how would we treat our child. But you're actually talking on a metaphysical level. The inner child in me is always going to be there and always live. Man, that's a really great interpretation. You could go in so many different directions with this. You can also say like, hey, big, tough guy, would you treat your 5-year-old self like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Guy who's bullying other people or whatever. And of course not. But what he's projecting is the way that he was treated and trying to like level the playing field. I mean, I've been through that as well. I was really bullied as a kid. And I even find now that it's hard for me to show vulnerability because that might make me seem weak to somebody else. But what I've learned since I've had kids and I've met people like, I don't know if you know Kyle Kingsbury, but he's a good friend of mine. And, another, Checky. And yeah, he was actually at Paul's birthday as well when we all did this ceremony. That's when we became good friends. The guy's like 6'4" and he's built like a freaking Adonis. And he gives the sweetest, most tender hugs. And I've seen him on TV beating the shit out of somebody and getting himself
MMA fighter, right?
MMA, yeah, he was like a UFC combatant for years. So, when I think about all of these guys out there, none of us have it all figured out. But the men that I feel the most safe with are not the big, strong, brawny guys. Mm-hmm. It's those guys that are playing, that they're still sort of fostering this child inside of them. Remembering not only to be curious, but to be sensitive and to be, allow themselves to be loved. That is definitely a part of my story, is not having enough self-love. And if you don't love yourself, you're going to teach your kid inadvertently. It's not a conscious thing you're doing, but you're going to teach them that self-love is not a virtue. Go ahead.
And you don't just teach them through your actions, Nathan. You teach them because you mentioned Jung. I think it's Jung that quotes, what is left undone by the parent is passed on to the child. So if you've embodied a practice of not self-love within you for whatever traumatic reason, with no judgment, that's passed on to the child. And that is going back to karma, right? That's now their karma to sort of move through in many ways. Mm-hmm. Nathan, I want to be mindful of time here. And I could feel I could be in your presence and having this discussion for a very long time. But unfortunately, we're not in that ethereal space where time is not a component yet anyway. So, Nathan, I would love to give you a bit of space here now before we wrap up. I have one more question for you, but before I get to that, you are doing so many beautiful things in this world. And if people have tuned in today, they have been pulled to your Nathan Riley-ness and they want to spend more time with you in all the ways. What offerings, what your website, where do you want to direct people to find out more?
When will this episode go live on your other channels?
I'd probably say in the next month or so.
Okay. Well, if you're just listening, and by the way, Harrison, I hope we get to meet in person someday. You're a rad guy. You are very much in my family of good men. And I just really
thank you, Nate,
to be invited on your show. So thank you.
Received, Nathan.
So if anybody out there is listening, it's probably sometime in April, but it's not an offer that's going away anytime soon. You might be listening to this just as we open up the wait list for a course that I'm putting out. It's called the Born Free Method, and it is the most comprehensive pregnancy and postpartum preparation program that's available anywhere in the world. It has been 8 months of hard labor getting this thing together, but it's not your everyday childbirth education class. We get into radical responsibility, accepting your decisions and the outcomes of those decisions. It gets into a lot of history of midwifery and obstetrics and birth. There's a whole unit just for fathers and really kind of going deep into some of these topics we've been clarifying. And of course, it covers all of the risks, benefits, alternatives to virtually everything that I've ever been asked about pregnancy and postpartum. It's in collaboration with one of the farm midwives. There's a famous farm in Tennessee started by a woman and a bunch of midwives named Ina Mae Gaskin. And Sarah, my co-creator of this course, is a farm midwife, which has a bit of a legacy, a couple generations now. And we get into everything under the sun related to what you may or may not know or need to know and in pregnancy. So there's so much that I can't even summarize it in an elevator speech. There's so much covered. But in addition to the course, which is a self-guided tour, you also get a weekly mastermind with me or Sarah. We alternate every week for 12 months. So it is a hell of a deal. And it is the embodiment of basically my entire life's work as a birth attendant. And I do want to correct something. You said I'm a midwife, but I would never be able to honor that title sufficiently to wear it. Midwives have done so much good over the millennia for the care of women and children and the elderly and the sick. But I do aspire to embody more of the traditional midwifery model of care for women going through this sacred transformation. And I feel like my role as a doctor helps people navigate around the system and through the system if they end up relying on that. But also for this spiritual transformation that happens with both partners, their relationship, the baby coming into the earth school. There's so much to unpack here that isn't being met in the world. And so this is my offering to everybody. Please go to bornfreemethod.com to check it out. Or my website is belovedholistics.com. Eventually the two will be merged, but for now you can find everything there. And I also see people for fertility. There's packages you can buy for pregnancy, postpartum support. I do attend home births. That's a pretty unusual thing for OB-GYNs. I never charge that much money. It's really a matter of just providing care to people that need it. And you mentioned my podcast. That's a lot, but that's what I've got going on.
Well, Nathan, it is a lot, but I've known this about you just from tuning into your frequency before our chat, but especially after connecting to you so deeply today, it's a lot because you are so in tune with your unique frequency, right? I think this is another misconception that we didn't get to talk about today, but once we connect to our inner space of uniqueness, our spiritual awakening in many ways, we start to realize that our baseline state is one of abundance. So when I hear you expressing all these beautiful offerings, Nathan, I really encourage people. So this will be April, May, but people watching live here now, you can, in Facebook, for example, you can go straight to Nathan's website and I'll put it in the chat after so you can go there now. But you connect into that Nathan Riley-ness and it's abundant. right? So you start just producing all the things because you can't stop, right? Because that's you, right?
Yeah.
So I see you, Nathan, and I really enjoyed this conversation today. And thank you for sharing that frequency with me. I'm getting my own value out of it. My last question today before we wrap up is a question I ask everyone. I grew up as a little boy, Nathan. You don't know this. I grew up as a little boy that grew up in a religious culture, school environment, and I became very disillusioned with the fact that my higher power was something outside of me on a cloud keeping score. And I became atheist, but then I came back to my higher power by remembering that my higher power is love. My higher power is this love frequency that we've spoken about in a couple of different ways today. Mm-hmm. So my question for you, Nathan, is in your unique world, how do you personally define that love word?
Oh, man.
That's an easy one for you.
Yeah, softball, right? How do I define love? I don't want to steal from anybody else, but our friend Paul, of course, has mentored me quite a bit on love. And I don't think that it's necessary for us to, classify it in some way as romantic versus platonic or whatever. I think love is, I'm going to go back to my vision statement. I think that love is a force. I think love is the creative force of the universe. And I think that when we look at childbirth or death for that matter, we are seeing love at play. But we don't have to just look for it in these rites of passage. The reason that these rites of passage are so important is because death is on the line. It's not a true initiation unless death is on the line. And I don't mean death of the mom and baby. I mean death of your identity in ways that we've already described. Love is the driving force of the cosmos. It is through these rites of passage that you have a recreating, a rebirthing, if you will, of not just the human being, but this entire cycle, all of these energetic bodies. It's that little bit of sea foam that comes up above the waves and then crashes back down into this collective pool. Of course, we're getting into consciousness territory when we start speaking like that. And of course, I'm stealing that metaphor from somebody. But love is what's driving the waves. Love is the force that is causing these little explosions, these little droplets that are me and you and everybody else, and then falling back down into the waves. The love is that force. And I do want to say that the closest thing you can get to being in the presence of the divine is probably a whole body orgasm. But it's not quite close enough. You can be in direct relationship, a private audience with the divine, call it source, spirit, God, whatever you want, if you can be present with the birth of a baby. And if we're going to change anything about the world, all these issues, it has to start with how we accept childbirth as a rite of passage. And we can honor this creation of something new, this death and rebirth struggle, to go back to Stan Groff. And all of that is being perpetuated and driven forward by love.
Just going to let that sit for a little bit, just to let the presence in that answer speak for itself. Nathan, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. Thank you for sharing your Nathan Rileyness with me and everyone tuning in. All the beautiful audience members that joined live on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn, thank you for your attention today. If you're listening to this on the podcast, we hope this brought you love and light. If it did, please share this far and wide. But until next time here on the show, both Nathan and I love you unconditionally, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna with me, your host, Harrison. If you gained value or this episode hit your heart, please remember to share this out with a friend, a family member, or a lover. You can also leave your love over on Apple reviews and Spotify star feedback, and this helps me spread my frequency to more souls in need. Finally, if you want to connect with me deeper, want to reach out, interested in coaching, Please follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn at Harrison Maher, Maher spelled Meagher. Sending you so much love.
Electric acid.